What do you think the secret to a successful creative career is?
Ignorance. If you overthink it, it gets in the way. Sometimes you just got to chase it because you want to chase it. Early on, I chased main titles, even though they weren't lucrative. People were like, why are you doing a job that doesn't get you money? And I'm like, I'm building a reel, and the reel gets you other work, and they just don't see like the value in that. So I was creating for work for other people, but I was also investing in myself. Early on in my career, I was at a really good shop called Digital Kitchen, and it was quite chauvinistic and not exactly the best place, but it was the best place for me. I had so much opportunity that I would just take, and they wouldn't say no. Sometimes we get tangled up so much on what it should be like to forget what the blessings are in there.
Today, I'm speaking to Erin Sarofsky, the Emmy-nominated creative director and CEO or CCO.
Both.
Both. Yeah, we'll probably get into that a little bit later. Obviously, they're a really famous studio, famous for creating kind of iconic movies, not creating the movies, but Marvel, working on films like Marvel and film sequences and just really working with some of the top brands in the world. So I'm really excited to speak to you today, Erin, and thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. That sounds like a good place to start. Like, you are the sole owner of Sarofsky Studio, and I think it's very common when people start a business that they have a co-founder or they have one or two co-founders. And to me, this is something that you've built a team now, you have a big team, but it's something that were able to get off the ground and get up and running on your own. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that. Like, how have you built this successful company
All
off
by
your own
myself.
back?
Yeah. So interestingly, I don't know that I would have had that confidence to build it myself if I didn't have already started a company, like a very fast failed company with two partners. And I'm so grateful that it was a fast fail. And we can, if you want, we can get into why or my memory of why. But it part of it was like 07, 08. Oh no, 08. Oh, early 08 to the end, towards the end of 08. It didn't even make it a year. And even during the course of that year, how dramatically people's lives change, and you go from like total alignment, everybody's excited, to actually this isn't enough for somebody, or it's not what somebody expected, or it's harder than it seemed like it was going to be. Also, what I needed to earn was different than what my partners needed to earn, and we were different stages in our life. So it became like really apparent pretty quickly that it was like a marriage that should have been like maybe a dating situation. But what that did is it brought me back to Chicago, which is where I wanted to start a company, and kind of had me moving down that path already. And we had essentially dissolved the company, though it's not as simple as that. But I'll say I was no longer working for it, and I don't think it was producing work for anybody else as it slipped into 09. And at that point, I had a friend who wanted to hire, not so much a friend, but like a client or a person that we were either dancing around doing some work with. They reached out and said, we have a job. And I was like, I don't have a company anymore. And we're going to work with you. So as long as you have a company, just bring your team together. Because I was very transparent about the fact that we were a startup and it was all freelancers except me. And so that was that. I had to run down to the courthouse in sweats and like file paperwork from my lawyer and talk to my accountant, get everything set up. And it was just like that. It was very, very quick. I didn't really have time to think about what it meant, or let alone 15, 20 years later, what that would mean. It was just like, okay, there's this job and I'm excited about it and they're excited about us. And it's still like the same team of us, 3 or 4 freelancers. So let's go do it. And it was that simple. And that's what started it really as a sole proprietorship. Yeah.
It's really interesting. So you like, fast kind of mentality is something like in the startup world that we hear a lot about, and like you lived it firsthand, and sounds like you learned a lot through kind of a firestorm of different situations.
Yeah, no, I wish I could fail fast in a lot of other ways now as well. I think we could talk about a lot of other things, but there are some lessons I wish I learned faster over time. But here we are, and I'm really happy
That could be a really interesting thread as well,
with
actually.
what I built.
Tell us about that. What are some lessons that you wish you learned quicker?
So, especially when you're in for the long haul, things change over time that as they're changing, you don't see necessarily. It's like how a frog being boiled. Oh, it's warm, it's toasty. Okay, now you're a meal. But over time, things change very fast. And think in that first year, how things changed for all of us so dramatically that there was no longer a studio inside a company in a lot of ways. Like talent changes, our needs change, how we fit into the marketplace, what people are doing are changing, how things are growing, they're changing, how I'm growing and what my needs are changing. So oftentimes you get very stuck in this nostalgic idea of what it used to be instead of building towards what you need. And so you tend to hang on. I tend to hang on longer than I should and maybe tolerate more than I should in getting to that place. Even if I do voice a concern or something like that, there's still like longevity there and relationships that are now rooted in what is ultimately a business relationship. And so and things are changing out there, it's wild what's changing. Like our whole business is so different and the kind of talent we need is changing and the kind of jobs and where they need to come from is changing. And the kind of energy we have to put into sales is changing. And so the amount of time and energy we can put into work for what people are paying is different. So it's all shuffling around and some people are resilient and very adaptive and some people are not. And that's okay. It might mean that it's not the right fit anymore. And if somebody's going to call it at the end of the day, it's likely going to have to be me because I'm the one owner. I got to play good cop and bad cop. So yeah, it all falls on me to make that final kind of decision, be the bad guy. Yeah.
Cool. So there's another common kind of thread here, then something that you've mastered is there's people in the creative industry tend to get to a point in their career when they're faced with this kind of options of do they move into do they build a business and they become the business owner, or do they want to stay the creative and be the creative? And that can be a management role inside a company, or it can be building the studio as you've done. Like, how do you manage that balance between creative and business?
Yeah, I think most of my job now is the business side of it, is the operations and the running of things. But there is a creative angle that is really important to me, and like creative excellence is our product. And so I think of talent curation as like my biggest creative input into the business, choosing the right people with the right point of view.
So what I wanted to ask is that is that balance between creative and operations something that's shifted throughout your career? Did you start more
Definitely.
creative and is it changed?
Yeah. I was the primary creative. I was designing and animating, rendering. I was in every aspect of the production process to start. And then eventually I had another creative lead that we were like in cahoots on everything. And then things got so big that we had to be siloed. And then it just got to the point where I really needed to fully engage with what was happening with operations and sales and things like that. And so I would say over the last 3 years, I have definitely moved more into that territory. It does feel like I'm a little bit like on hiatus from like a lover. It feels like a little bit of, oh, I want to be so in the weeds on the work. I do miss that. But I also am very heavily involved in development and I do take a job usually I have 1 or 2 jobs going on, which probably sounds like a lot. For me, doing a job or 2 is no big deal. So leading a job for 2 is not a problem. Yeah.
So let's talk about that for a moment. So I imagine it's quite stressful running such a large company. Is there like any kind of routines or habits you have that help you protect your kind of creativity or well-being?
Any rituals or habits? I try to break my day up into like pockets. So before work starts, I do a couple hours of email and just like admin stuff to knock out anything that's like lingering in the e-box or the to-do list or like an insurance policy or just all of that stuff that can really just pile up on you if you let it go for a few days. It's actually amazing how incessant that stuff is. And then so it's like starting a day with a fresh inbox, I would say is like the best habit I get into. Now that I have a little bit of a commute, I moved out to the northern suburbs and we go into office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I do listen to a lot of business podcasts, like either about people growing their businesses or like very specific podcasts, things like that, or business books. And I find a few of them have like really resonated with me. And so just something as simple as like traction. Most business owners probably read that like the first second they started a business. It took me quite a bit to dig in on it. But there are some ritualistic things that you can plan into your quarters and weeks that like allow you to keep things moving forward that need to move forward so that you're not ever stalling out on stuff that needs to be making progress, but isn't necessarily on your to-do list every day. There's always going to be a client email or a call or a trip or something that's going to be a little bit more important. So like, how do you keep that back burner stuff going? And I found Traction was really great at helping me with that. And then from an inspirational perspective and a storytelling perspective, I really love the podcast called Acquired. It's these two guys, they do some very deep research into these big, massive, enormous companies, which my company isn't even close to that. But the way they talk about the owners and the leadership within those companies, I find really fascinating. And I would say every day my house is on the line. Like I feel like every day I'm like going all in on something. And that's a lot and it's exhausting. But when I started listening to this podcast, I really realized like that's the life of an entrepreneur. Like we just believe in ourselves. We believe in what we're doing. Nobody else could possibly understand it. You know what I mean? Like in any way, shape, or form. I do believe, like, when you sit with another business owner and you just do a heavy sigh, like, they know what it is. You don't have to say it. It's just, yeah, okay. Because people think, like, you own a business, you could do whatever you want. Like, you don't report to anybody. But I don't feel like I own a business. I feel like the business owns me. And maybe I'm just in a certain stage of business ownership where it feels like that. But I do feel like this podcast has taught me the validity and the upside of making the big swings. Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking to PJ Richardson last week, and he voiced this idea that obviously it's stressful, but like he said, you need to treat creativity like athletes treat their body, like
Yeah.
to like, and he personally, I think it's different for everyone. Like he did journaling, he did a lot of breath work. He said he does at
Yeah.
the moment, and things like that. Have you ventured in and any kind of
Yeah.
wellness
Wellness.
or
Oh,
whatever?
I have a therapist, and that's very helpful. And I don't skip doctor appointments and things like that. So I make sure that I'm not neglecting things.
Mm.
But I would say that's not necessarily caring for. That's just like baseline, making sure something very bad isn't happening that I don't know about. But I do have my creative practice is an experimentation. I think when AI came out, I was like, "Oh, what's this?" I do think I show extreme curiosity in the new frontiers of things that I don't necessarily see like amongst everybody, I would say. I think a lot of people think their jobs are very secure and that this is going to be around forever. And I was very much a part of the desktop revolution generation where we literally upended a whole field, like multiple fields. Like the computer came in and now all of a sudden there was Photoshop and we could set type on a computer. And so people that hand set type no longer had jobs in a few years. So I think we could either be a part of that revolution that's happening. And I think actually we're ahead of the game because it's software. We know how to use software. It's not like moving from being a sea creature to a land creature, going from like in the real life to in a computer. I think the tools are by and large kind of the same. And I think we were used to very early generation software, which had a lot of limitations and you had to experiment and really do a lot of trial and error and maybe even be a little bit of a programmer. So playing around in AI is very much reminding me of when I was in grad school in 99, 2000. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that we'll talk about more is that it is scary, this whole kind of AI moment. And there's one thing even this week that I was like, oh, wow. Because traditionally we think that, okay, AI can do the work, it can do the process. Maybe it'll generate the video instead of picking up the camera, but it's still the idea, the creativity that is
Right.
uniquely human and
Yeah.
some people would say impossible. But just this week, so OpenAI launched their new model called O3. And in the first minute, their president of OpenAI, he says that this model is verified by scientists that it can generate novel and useful ideas. And I was like, well, that's basically the definition of creativity. It's always been able to come up with novel ideas,
Yeah.
depending on who you speak to. But it hasn't really been able to come up with novel and useful ideas like that. Have you played much with this kind of O3? It's been 1 week.
No, I haven't played with Sora. I'm definitely working with ChatGPT and playing around in there. I don't know if it got upgraded, but I haven't, not to my knowledge, not like knowingly been playing with it.
I had a little experiment because I was like, I gave it a little task and I was like, come up with a brand name for this. And I invented a brand. And it's something I've tried before. And like this new model, just in the last couple of weeks, it does come up with better ideas.
Okay.
I was like, is this the beginning of creativity? Like,
Yeah. Creativity is reamalgamations of things that already exist. I do believe that. I believe, especially when you talk visually, it's a little Rothko, it's a little this, it's a little that, you're using reference to, in a way, create something new. With generating like an idea from the jump, it's still, if you're starting a sneaker company and you want it to work with it to develop a name and all of that, are you giving it any information to start, or are you just saying, I have a sneaker company, go for it?
yeah, no, I
Because
give it quite a lot of information.
I found that if I do a better job at describing what I'm looking for, it does a better job of helping me. But also, we work in an industry and have for many years where we know what a good brief is. So we are essentially giving the AI like a super premium brief to be able to do its job. And I wonder if in somebody else's hands, it's just not going to have necessarily the information, or to be able to have a person follow up with the right questions to be able to get it to the place where it should go or could go.
That's a very good point, because a lot of creativity, right? Like you never know which idea is going to land, but as a kind of a creative, this is what clients come to us for.
Yeah.
They come to us for kind of the cultural understanding, the gut feeling, the things that you can't put into words, but you've been practicing for a long time.
So I do think it's like what you get in is what you get out. And then it's all about curating what you get out, having a point of view, all of that. Even if the computer is doing all the work and you're guiding it through it, there's a big difference between a good creative director and a not a good creative director, and a good client that knows themselves and not a good client that knows themselves. A client that knows when to say, I've had ChatGPT, I'll be like, hey, how does this sound? And they're like, it sounds good. Maybe just add a comma. And then sometimes let me rejigger this for you. And it makes a lot more sense. It's not trying to like create value for itself. If something is working, it's going to say it's working. And if something's not working, it can tell you how to do it better. So, yeah.
Yeah, we've jumped around a little bit, but one of the things that you are doing is the Skrimps, obviously. So while we're talking about AI, why don't you introduce that kind of project and explain that a little bit? Where did it come from and what is it?
Yeah, so early on, it was probably about 2 years ago now, in Midjourney, you can upload an image of yourself into everybody was in every feed everywhere was pictures of people that have turned themselves into wizards and superheroes and Superman, and there they go. There it is. And so I was like, oh, that's really super cool that you could do that. And I had been playing around in Midjourney a little bit with my friend Austin Shaw. We share the Discord channel, and we still do. I'm like, we gotta work through. I want to turn myself into a Muppet. And he's okay. And he's in there turning himself into, of course, a wizard and a goblin and all this stuff. And I'm like, I make this into a Muppet. And I'm starting to get not great results. And then he starts playing around, and we're both hacking at this picture of me. And then we add a picture of him and we start hacking at it. We started making progress. And when we finally had something we liked, I shared it with people, and they like lost their minds. They were like, oh my God, this is so funny and really just unlike anything else. And what I learned in doing it was that a lot of I'm a big fan of fiber arts, and I'm a knitter, and I just know a lot about nonsense like that, right? And so I was prompting with a lot of that in there. And I was also prompting with some comedic stuff, so it wasn't perfect. And I was getting these like really very tactile results. So it got to a point when I was posting stuff just on my Instagram or wherever, people were like, wow, did you make that? I'm like, in AI, they're thinking I'm like spending all night felting portraits of people. Some people were pissed. They were like, I thought you actually made those. And I'm like, why would I to make these things? No, but it was really cool. You really got, like, the tooth and the texture of it, and you really got and Austin was at this point doing it too, both of us together, like, the sense of humor that we had surrounding it, so it became, like, a little bit of a comedy project and a just this fun thing to it made us laugh a lot. It really was just about joy, and people would ask to be scrimped, and we'd scrimp them, and they would think it was hilarious, and it was just about spreading joy and doing something fun, and then I actually, then we started to have problems getting Midjourney to give us the same results, and it kept getting further and further and further away, and I was like, "Okay, I guess that's the thing about AI is you never know what you're gonna get, and it's gonna change and evolve," and but we learned that we could go back to the original model that we were working in to get it right, and so we were able to go back and start recreating some of the results we were getting pretty close, so at that point, once I knew I had some kind of way to continue with it and not have the model change out from under me, I created the Meet to Scrimps page and the website and all the things, and it's its own little thing. So I've got almost 30,000 followers and it's going really well right now. I'm working on creating an AI animation pipeline. I have some friends helping with that as well, and hopefully in the next month or so, some little animation tests have been posted to Instagram, but those are a little bit hit and miss, and I need something that's a little bit more sustainable and repeatable. We're in Comfy now, and we've got all this stuff kind of feeding into it, and it's pretty cool. It's really a pretty cool thing. It does feel like the old days of early HTML and JavaScripting, and if you were in Director, the programming that you did in there, and it's just like really super fun times where it's really all about experimentation. You're not even necessarily understanding 100% why something works or why it doesn't work. It's pretty cool.
That's cool. Yeah, have you there used to be a program in the UK, I don't know if it made it to the US. It was called Spitting Image, and it was
Y-
like
I know exactly what it is, but it didn't make it to the US, but I've definitely seen it. And it is, I do political stuff. I don't really feel like I could be very political on my personal side, nor in my business. And so I definitely let the scrimps be a little bit of an outlet like that.
cool. So do you imagine it being something like that, where you could take like a news item and a script that you've created and you're gonna
Yes.
make quick
Yes.
edits and
100%. So we have some writers coming together. So I'm hoping to get a little bit of a writer's room going where the technology is still scrimpy. That's the perfect way to put it. It's not quite right. And sometimes the results, like, I feel like if they're 75% of the way there, I'm fine. You know what I mean? And I think we have to be okay with imperfect and just say it's a scrimp. It's not a Muppet. It is rooted in inherent flaw. And so maybe the AI aspect of that being so new and trying to figure it out is something that we're going to embrace. But what we do want to do is scrimp folks and then take their own things that they've said and have it come out of their mouths. I think that you're going to see a bit of that happening in the early days. And then we're also working on some bits that are maybe a minute long little sketch
yeah.
that we can write up and maybe churn out one or two of these a week and see if we can get, that it's a show per se, but we've got our YouTube and our TikTok and all the things that we need to start
Mhm.
just putting content out and seeing. For me, this is also about seeing what people find funny today and what people is going to strike with people and bring people like aha moment, but maybe just through a little bit of comedy.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of models now that can take a still image and do lip syncing if you upload an audio, but because of they're not anatomically correct. Have you experimented with them?
Yeah. So the main technical problem with literally every lip sync program is if you can get it to recognize the face, which is about 10% of the time, which is not enough because the mouth, when it's like a normal aspect ratio to the face, it'll usually know that it's a mouth. But if it's a wide mouth or just something about the proportions is crazy, which that's what we go for. So we go for more of a cartoon aesthetic. So from a proportions perspective. And so if you can get it to work, any lip sync will make a human mouth. So lips, a tongue, the whole deal. And it's
Right.
like the stuff nightmares are into. So
Yeah.
it's I don't want to put that out. So the big thing has been how do you get it to recognize the face almost every time and train it that this is a mouth, these are eyes, this is the basic foundation of the mouth. And then once you have the lip sync, because lip sync does have to come first, how can you then treat it to have the felted kind of taco mouth that you need? And I was going reverse. I was saying, okay, initially, I was doing like felting the mouth, getting it looking right, then trying to do the lip sync. And I'm like, what is going on here? It just seemed like the natural order of things. But then I have some folks helping me and they were like, maybe we'll reverse that. And it started to work. And I was like, okay. For some of the more out there scrimps, we definitely have to have something to identify the mouth and the eyes, something that's a little bit understands that it's a cartoon.
AI, you can do like for more traditional kind of animation, you can do like sprite sheets in AI now.
Totally. We are in this weird no man's land right now because we wanted to have like kind of human gestures and facial movements, but we wanted to have the felted mouth and for it to feel really like a puppet or a Muppet kind of sock puppet talking. Yeah.
Have you so I guess with your pipeline, you could reskin it. Instead of it being felt, it could be, I don't know, they're made of stone, or would that
I mean,
break?
I feel like that's the thing about AI is literally anything is possible. And I feel like there are a lot of models out there that it would almost be easier to then say, turn this into a Simpsons like cartoon or turn this
Uh,
a human even, turn
right.
this character back into a human. I think for some reason, this thing that we want to do with the tactile and the quirkiness throwing it for a loop right now. But I guess that's the challenge I wanted when I first went in there was like everybody is making themselves these photo real things.
Mm,
I would like a photo real thing too with human characteristics, but rendered in a photo real way, but not a cartoon. You know what I mean? It's
mhm.
in this like weird kind of
Yeah.
space.
This last couple of weeks, and we've seen it, everyone's making themselves into a doll
Yeah.
with ChatGPT inside the kind of the
Yeah.
packaging, and it's just become really like the first 1 or 2 were like, "Oh, that's
That's
cool,"
fun.
and now
Yeah.
everyone's like, "Oh god, stop it. Everyone stop it, please."
Yeah.
But this is, like, the interesting thing about AI, like, it makes a lot of work that took a lot of effort easy to do. If we talked
Right.
about it'd be interesting to ask you what you think about that Studio Ghibli, sorry, the anime style that they've copied and everyone was making, like, a rehash of themselves. Like,
Yeah.
it's destroyed this guy's art that he created over a lifetime and just made it cheap and generic.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think that super sucks. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think that there is a way around that. So that's unfortunate. I do think like some of the filters turn this into claymation, turn this into there is an aspect of if I don't know if I'm like validating or disvalidating, but if me in 5 minutes wants to turn myself into an anime character in the style of that, like I would never hire this guy to do that for me. This is just a little fun thing to throw on my page and then to move on. Hopefully it doesn't devalue his work to a huge degree. Hopefully it just grows in popularity so that if somebody does want that like for a real commercial aspect, they would then have to work with him. You know what I mean? And maybe he could even embrace some AI tools to streamline and evolve his process. That would probably be cool. I think that's how I'm dealing with it. I think the true reality is it's not going away.
Yeah. It's a bit awkward because he's gone on the record to say how much he hates AI. Like, he's totally anti-AI.
Yeah,
But
and I
it just
get it. Yeah.
it throws a light on how, like, the thing that you're doing with AI is difficult. So it's if it's difficult and unique, then it's still gonna have value. But I mean, there's no real answer to this. Like, it does
So
the
if I
art.
were this guy, I would be going in and like figuring out the prompts to get his art looking like them and then copywriting them because you can copyright prompts now. So I would be getting like as far ahead of it as I could.
You can
Yeah.
copyright prompts.
Yeah.
You can copyright prompts, but you can't copyright the output. It's this.
But that's not true. Like you can copyright the output. First of all, if you could copyright the prompt, I bet you could, and you own that copyright, I bet you then would own the output. Maybe. I don't know about that. I can ask my lawyer about that. But it doesn't take a lot for you to own the output. The fact that you're even putting in an image, at least in my case, means that it's not all the AI, right?
Yeah.
It's not all of that. And then we tend to do a lot of post work on stuff to noodle it. And then if we were to add sound and VO and all of that, like the time-based stuff, the little sketches that we're gonna produce, we would for sure own that because it changes what it is. Yeah.
It's super complex. It changes per country. Depends what country you're in,
That
and
too.
depends the percentage of AI versus what was all AI, etc. But it's
Yeah.
like we are in the Wild West. It's still not been tested in a lot of cases, and yeah, if you obviously the Skrimps thing is a it's not like a commercial project. Have you managed to or are interested at all in using AI in any commercial projects?
Yeah, absolutely. I think of it as not like I think of it as a piece of the pipeline. I don't think of it as like the whole thing. What I'm trying to do with Scrimps is actually to create a pipeline that is predominantly AI, especially the animation of the things. But it's still going to be edited together and by a real editor, and then there'll be real voice talent. It won't be AI voices because I have a thing about that for now anyway. But in the studio, we use it as much as we can. Like we use Firefly here and there for things, and certainly we use all sorts of tools that help with upresing and roto, and there's all sorts of like little tricks and gadgets that are all fueled by AI. If you're using an Adobe project, you're probably using some AI. Just if you want to select somebody's face, like that's AI. Like it's a facial recognition tool. So I think that question is usually, would you ever consider doing a piece from start to finish in AI? And the answer is, of course I would. I'd be, if it's going to help me create this piece of commercial content like faster and at a high production quality, I'm all for that. Yeah, I'm all for it. It's definitely not there. And it's definitely going to be a while before everything can be done just by clicking a button, but just by a prompt or two. It's not even close. And for the people experimenting with that, they still have a deep background in what we do. And that's why they're able to get results out of it that are somewhat tolerable or
Yeah,
great. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Have you ever considered, because you're going to build this pipeline, that could be a product that you sell to other people. Have you ever considered that?
That's interesting. Cause yeah, I feel like maybe one of the few things we own is like our process, right? But more and more, like we have to hand over our files when we kit things and all of that stuff. And I do feel like with how Wild West AI is, the pipeline is gonna break and be fixed 1,000 times in the next year. I feel like once we have something figured out, it's only a matter of time before it like stops working or there's something better available. So it's gotta be, like, constant experimentation. But
Yeah.
I guess you could. It would be fun to create an app where people could scrimp themselves and make things with their scrimps. So, tactile in the real life kind of thing. So, perhaps working on something like that as well. Like, the more I see people engage with it and the more, like, giggles people get from it, the more I think there's legs there as a brand. Yeah.
The reason I ask is because it seems to me like AI is coming for kind of the production work. Maybe in the future, we're not going to set keyframes and the technical animation side of things that might disappear. So I think an option for creatives to hedge their bets is to create like IP like you have,
Totally.
or to push
Pipeline.
a
Yeah.
little bit further into kind of like building it as a web app.
Mm.
Because vibe coding's a thing now. Like you can blunder your way through not really understanding anything.
Totally.
How do I do this? And it didn't work. Tell me again. So I think that's a potential area for creatives too.
I agree. That's why I say, like, just get in and get working. Get in and get working. I don't know that people have to make it their whole life and do the hard pivot. There's still a lot of work that needs to get done, and it's still gotta get done the old-fashioned way. But yeah, I think to your point, like, creating IP or creating tools is definitely an area where you could probably accumulate wealth and stability for yourself
Yeah,
future-proofing. Yeah.
AI, it just makes it able to do a lot of things much quicker, but you still need that motivation, that initiative, maybe that curiosity, like you say, to actually pick them up and begin.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gotta start somewhere.
Let me circle back a little bit.
Okay.
Like, so I sent my AI bots to do research on you, and like I know that from research that your hobbies are comedy and knitting and this fiber artist.
Yeah.
So there's a clear direction. There's a clear correlation between the project that you've created and your hobbies. Like, how important is it to have interests outside of what we do for work? And do you encourage that in your team as well?
Yeah, it's important to do things in the world. I do think hobbies are very important where not everything is work. For me, somehow everything a little bit feeds into work. I'm just one of those like crazy type A people where it's, oh, that could be a business. Let's trademark this. Let's create a website. Let's do the thing. So I'm a little bit like a squirrel, but I just think hobbies are great. And I think hands-on hobbies are super important. I think it's really important to be off the computer. And I think it's really important to be out in the world, talking to people and connecting. And there's nothing funner than to go to a fiber arts festival and hang out with those kind of folk and or go to the knitting store and see what kind of new gadgets they have and how they work, or sign up for what was the last class I took? It was like a reversible knitting pattern, this reversible herringbone knitting pattern that whenever I would look at the pattern, it just didn't make sense to me. So I took a little class on how to do that. And that was super fun. Yeah, I can't express like how important it is to just be out in the world experimenting with whatever makes you happy.
You mentioned courses as well, and courses or like education is one of the things that
Yeah.
you're known for doing your weekend workshops. How did that begin?
Yeah, we always get so many resumes for people that for sure always want to work on main titles. And you just look at their reel or their book and you're just like, okay, they're not there. But like, how do you get there? Like, how do you even know? How do you even know? So we were talking about it one day and I was talking to one of my creative directors, Duart, and I was like, what if we just have this weekend class where people can come in and we give them a little kind of taste of what it's like to get to work on these things, but do it in a real way so that they would maybe have a piece for their portfolio and understand like how our work is judged and the kind of brief we give and all of that stuff. And it's been like really successful at introducing people that would have never had the opportunity to really see a process like that, whether even if they went to school, like it, who knows what the person knows about making main titles. So giving like very real, legitimate feedback. Oh, something as simple as all your type is different sizes. You can't do that. And here's why, because of the contract. Oh, that's a really interesting thing. And if I see a student board, I know it's a student board because I can see the type is all different sizes. And if they were in a studio environment, it wouldn't be like that. So just something simple like that could set somebody up for success of getting a job that could do that. Also, for us, it was a really great recruitment tool. We met so many talented people that wouldn't have necessarily felt comfortable sending us their reel, but because we like worked with them one-on-one, we saw how they took direction. And that's just like something you don't see in a reel. So we met a lot of really great freelancers and collaborators through that program.
Yeah, you made a good point because this is a rare kind of thing because title sequences only exist at the top of the industry. They're in films, they're in kind of Netflix, Amazon. So how'd you learn that? You don't start at the top, obviously.
No, yeah.
Like, who comes to these classes? Is it like students or is it like mid-career people as well?
All over the place, even end of career people. We have a few folks that were like, I'm so done with advertising. I want to do something different. It's always been of interest to me. It's been amazing. It really has been. And it's so refreshing to see like a college student that's like literally in school, a lot of online education students too. We have a lot of school emotion folks that show up. And what's fun is it almost becomes like a touch point for them to connect in real life. So they know each other from being at school together online, and then they all decide they're going to take this class with us, or a few of them, a pocket of them, and then they get to see each other and hang out for the weekend and like collaborate in real life too. So that's lovely. Yeah.
Do they get to learn a little bit of your process as well then?
Yeah, we are very transparent. We show a lot of examples that we can't show online or to the world. We show a lot that is like all NDA kind of stuff. So I shouldn't have said that, but it's not published anywhere. And it's like just eyes only, no files or anything like that, no pictures.
Yeah, we didn't hear them.
Wow.
Let's talk about your process a little bit because I read that you start every project with the same kind of 3 fundamental questions. Is that right?
Yeah. What are those questions? What did the AI say those questions were?
AI said it is, what are we saying? Who are we saying it to? And what's going to make it relevant? And I really wanted the first two are
Yeah,
obvious.
Yeah.
They're fundamental. Yeah. What are we saying? Who are we saying it to? But for me, the third one, I hope this is true. If AI got it right.
It is.
Or maybe you can hallucinate an answer for it as well.
Yeah.
No, but tell us, so what is the deeper meaning of, tell us more about what you mean by meaning relevant.
So relevant is a few things coming together. So like when we're doing a main title for Marvel, for example, or DC, a big superhero main title, it has to relate to the film, obviously, right? Like it has to feel like it's in that world. So it's superhero genre. It's got a lot going for it, but it also has to fit within a universe. And so it can't look like anything else that's been in that universe. Otherwise, it's not relevant to the thing. I think relevant and ownable are very similar words. Like it has to be so appropriate for what it's for that there could have been no other solution. But that's the relevance there. It's, can this property take that and own it because nothing else owns it? And if something else like maybe a little bit owns it, is it so appropriate for what it's for that it's undeniable? True Detective wasn't the first main title. It's not ours, but wasn't the first main title that did double exposure. Like, it's just the first main title that did double exposure, and it hit super hard. First of all, it was on a hit show. It had that two worlds things going on. It was just, it hit like the zeitgeist for that. So it was so relevant and so ownable for what it was. So evermore that was like, hey, can you guys do the True Detective thing? It went from like double exposure to being like that True Detective main title thing. And I think that's relevance and ownability and appropriateness for what it's for. Yeah.
Yeah. So like relevance to the project, the client, the story that you're trying to communicate.
Yeah.
Cool. So we started off this conversation talking about failing fast.
Oh yeah, failing fast.
And again, I've heard through AI that your motto is approach opportunities without fear of failure.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? I think that's why I resonate so hard with that Acquired podcast, is that these folks that are built these companies, they just like, they're okay with if it doesn't work out. They don't even see a future perhaps where it doesn't work out for them. And I think that, yeah, I think you can't be worried about failing. It just has to be one of those things. You just gotta follow your talent and your intuition and the numbers, and you gotta look at what feels right a lot of the time, even if it's a little bit wonky. Yeah.
Is this an element that you take into your leadership of the studio? Do you encourage people to take a little risk?
I hope so. I think there are some projects where it's clear that there's opportunity for that. And I think there are some projects where it's clear that there is not a lot of opportunity for risk taking. I think in like our marquee projects, there is a lot of opportunity for risk taking, and we definitely encourage that. If you're doing a pharma ad and you're going to have a ton of legal reviews and it took the agency or that brand a year to just get something approved, that's not where you want to go rogue. You want to be very respectful to the fact that it took them a while to get there and they're finally happy with the results, and they're just looking for you to make it as beautiful as possible, on budget, on schedule, all the things, and to elevate it without going full diva on it. But there are a lot of opportunities, and that's what I like about the main titles, is that usually we're writing the brief often. So if we get to write the brief, we get to define what success and failure looks like. Our showrunner may or may not agree with us and we may not get the job, right? But that's where we can really let people stretch and spread their creative wings. And it's lovely to have projects, like real commercial projects that would get produced and financed and all of that by a client and provide those opportunities. I think they're so rare in a career, let alone a few times a year, which is what we typically have, at least a few main titles a year that we get to stretch on.
Awesome. I'll keep you for almost an hour. I'm going to ask you one quick last question. It's probably a difficult one to answer.
Okay.
But you've been pretty successful in your creative career. What do you think the secret to a successful creative career is?
No, ignorance. I think if you overthink it, sometimes it gets in the way. Sometimes you just gotta chase it because you wanna chase it and not let any other pressures. Early on, I chased main titles even though they weren't lucrative. People were like, "Why are you doing a job that doesn't get you money?" And I'm like, "I'm building a reel, and the reel gets you other work," and they just don't see, like, the value in that. And, yes, I was creating for work for other people, but I was also investing in myself. And early on in my career, I was at a really good shop called Digital Kitchen, and it was quite chauvinistic and not exactly the best place, but it was the best place for me. I had so much opportunity that I would just take, and they wouldn't say no. They were like, "Oh, she's doing another board. Let her do another board." You know what I mean? So I feel like sometimes we get tangled up so much on what it should be like to forget like what the blessings are in there. This idea that nothing is perfect. There's no perfect fit. If you're looking for that, like it's never gonna work for you. You're always gonna find something to be unhappy about and a reason why wasn't a success. So you just gotta look for the opportunity and focus on that. Not to say you should be fully taken advantage of, but like I just think if you focus on the stuff that's lacking, you'll never see the opportunities in front of you. Yeah.
Awesome. Great
Mm.
message to finish on. So
Okay, I hope
thank
so.
you. Thank you for coming and being our guest on this podcast, and it was great to spend some time with you.
It was great to talk to you as well.
If you like this video, you love our weekly newsletter, sign up at designresources.ai.